Welcome to the Small Giants Fishbowl. This topic is Design Thinking Online. Design thinking is an exploratory approach to problem solving that includes and balances both analytical and creative thought processes. Explore some of the basics of design thinking with Beverly Engel, author of Design Thinking for Entrepreneurs. Okay, here we go.
Design thinking specifically is referred to, IDEO kind of coined the term and they use it to refer to their product design process, but its application into other areas of business. So it really is a design methodology that they use when they develop products that they've applied then to developing services, customer experiences, marketing plans. It's a somewhat linear but also very intuitive and iterative process in approaching a business problem. So it can be semantics. People refer to it as design strategy, design thinking, iterative thinking, innovation management. You know, it kind of all falls under the big umbrella of applying and using creative principles in a business context. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I originally came across design thinking a couple of years ago and did a fellowship program in California at California College of the Arts, and they developed the first program at a master's level, an MBA in strategic design, which again, it's just a lot of jargon and semantics as far as word usage. But what I found was really fascinating to me and really applicable was the approach that they took, they being, agencies like IDEO and other people out in California that really sort of propagated the design thinking concept, that the approach that they would take to any business challenge, whether it was, as routine as designing a product, or something as less tangible as being very specific in designing how a customer experiences your brand and your business physically in a physical space as they walk into your store or walk into your restaurant or shop or whatever. What I've been frustrated with over the past several years and had mentioned to Glenn was that when any time design thinking in a business context is mentioned in general mass media, the examples that are always used are really big companies. SAP has design thinking labs in all of its offices all over the globe. IDEO is quoted and referred to often. Microsoft uses it. IKEA uses it. Pretty much big, huge brands and corporations have been using design thinking since it sort of kind of bubbled out of this product development niche. And the frustrating part for me is that's all well and good. Those companies can afford to spend six figures to retain somebody to coach them on how to use design thinking in their space. It's really small businesses and entrepreneurs and people working from a place of values-driven business that I want to have access to that kind of information and kind of want to, just sort of demystify design thinking and let people know that it's not something that you have to be a huge corporation with a big budget to afford, quite frankly. So that's kind of why I got involved into design thinking and started working with clients and colleagues and really anybody who was interested and would listen about design thinking and how it would work in a small business setting. So that's kind of my backstory on that. Have y'all come across IDEO in any of your news readings, or familiar with Tim Brown or David Kelly or any of those names or anything along those lines ringing a bell? Because if you are familiar with the concept, I don't want to dig into it, into too much detail if you already know it. Yeah. What when you saw design thinking come up as a topic for the Fishbowl, what intrigued you guys about it? Kevin, I'm going to pick on you.
Yeah, no, I think it's just another perspective to look at from application to kind of business development. And I'm always kind of looking for different things to kind of keep keep it fresh, to be able to kind of pull ideas and see how they apply to our company.
Josh, what about you?
I had no frame of reference, so I'm a clean slate. So
I love clean slates. Just give me a marker and let me write on you. I'll make you a whiteboard. And that's, it's sort of the common tools for design thinking. You'll see if you Google it and look at the images that pop up, it's whiteboards and markers and post-it notes, people brainstorming and all that kinds of craziness happening. And that's really only one small part of design thinking. I'm hearing some feedback.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that me?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I just
Yeah,
I didn't want
was.
it to be me. I didn't want to be
Eric, you're on mute right now. Sorry
Eric.
about that.
This is Rochelle. Can you guys hear me?
Sorry, 1 second. Let's get everybody kind of back on the same page here. Rochelle, we can hear you. We can't see you.
Oh, good. Yes, I am calling from a landline, so I'm old schooling it today. Sorry. Do you want to see me? I can try to get my iPhone working here. I was trying to download the app. I didn't want to be late.
That's okay. You just go ahead and listen in, and I'll poke you every once in a while if you don't respond. How's that?
Okay, that sounds fine.
Rochelle, is that right?
It's Rochelle, yes.
Rochelle with an R. Okay.
And then Eric has also joined us from Nick's Pizza and Pub. And Dave, I'm going to assume that's you. I don't know if you can hear us from Fresno First Bank. But I think that gets everybody kind of on the same page. So Beverly, if you want to go ahead and go.
Oh yeah, jump back in. Kelsey, you mentioned we were talking just a few minutes ago about the webinar, and the approach that you guys are taking to that with it being new is really hints at design thinking, because you have rolled something out. You created a prototype for your webinar, rolled it out, tried it out. You're going to go back and tweak it. You tested it. Now you're going to go refine it. And you're going to try it again. So it's going to be this iterative process for your webinar until you get it to where you want it to be, right?
Yes.
That's very much a design-based and a design thinking process for approaching, a new product or a new service. Part of design thinking's methodology is a lot of emphasis on, there's equal emphasis kind of through the process, but most people will focus on the part of design thinking that's just the brainstorming ideation stage. And that's the part where everybody always has the most fun. It's like, oh, yay, let's sit down in a room with a marker and a whiteboard and get creative and have Post-it notes everywhere. And what are we going to do? Design thinking will back you up from that stage and say, okay, before you even get to that point, what's the problem that you're trying to understand and solve? So there's a lot more emphasis than I think in usual settings, where you want to spend some time getting to understand your problem, getting to understand the customer that you're trying to work with or for, do a little bit more of research on the front end. And I think just the word research can freak people out. I know I've had small business clients that immediately when I say, well, we need to do a little bit of research, they go, oh God, no, I don't have the time. I don't have the money. You don't need a whole lot of time and you don't need a whole lot of money. A lot of it is just talking to people, and some really good, especially in the retail space, really good retailers of all sizes seem to do that kind of research well, because they'll just ask customers, well, what do you think? We just brought this new product into our store. I work with a specialty running store, and they'll bring a new shoe product in or a new set of apparel or whatever, and just talk to customers as they come into the store and get their feedback. That's qualitative research right there. At no cost, because you've got people already on the sales floor asking the questions. They're taking down notes after those people leave. SurveyMonkey makes quantitative research super easy. You can shoot out a quick survey to your email list of customers or potential customers or advisors or whoever it is that you need to get some feedback from, and ask them a few questions and get some responses. Even a little bitty bit of research in the front end will clarify the process as you get into it. And that's, one of the tenets of design thinking is to approach your problem from a place of understanding and some degree of knowledge. I know we've probably all worked with people and maybe have done it ourselves. I know I've done it ourselves, where we just kind of jump to the conclusions and decide, well, of course I know what problem I'm solving and this is how I'm going to solve it, without ever really kind of thinking through on the front end if that really is truly the problem. There are quite a number of design thinking exercises that you can use to dig into kind of the discovery of the challenge at hand. Does that make sense? There's a great one called, and you can Google it. It's in the book that I wrote, but it's also available online. It's a real popular exercise called the 5 whys. So you end up basically you sound like a toddler, and you ask yourself why, to dig deeper into the problem or the challenge that you're working on. For example, this running store has a real problem with moving apparel. They bring in tons of apparel, and apparel's a big part of the business for that niche, but that particular store is not selling enough. Well, they need to ask themselves why. And your first why, the first question, isn't necessarily going to reveal the big some of the bigger problems at the bottom. So they've dug through and found out, after asking several whys, that they don't have enough of a size range on the larger sizes. That's one of their problems that they found out with inventory, in asking themselves the whys as well as asking customers whys. Whereas before they just thought, well, we're not getting the right color. The buyer thought that maybe it just wasn't the right color, the right brand. And in reality, nobody really cared much about the color of the brand. It was that they didn't have, the right size for them. Not everybody that's starting out running is a small. You know what I mean? So,
Beverly, how does
yes.
how does starting that 5 whys work for somebody that's more B2B versus somebody that's in the retail space? Because I know, like right now, our audience is split about 50-50 between the two, where you can't necessarily go. You don't have a large quantity of customers coming in that you can get information from.
Sure.
On those whys. How does that 5 why work for that audience?
You have to be a little bit more proactive with getting to the person that you're going to ask the questions of. I've done the 5 whys with a healthcare system and a group of docs, that they were a couple of doctors groups that had been heavy referral business, referring their patients into the healthcare system for extended care, and then all of a sudden were not. In that situation, it was a couple of sit downs with the physicians groups. One of them we had to take out to lunch and feed to get them to come to the table and chat with us. But then it was a lot more of, okay, well, why are you not referring as many patients in? Is there a level of care that we needed to address? I mean, it evolved into more of a conversation around why those physicians were making the choices that they were and leaving that particular healthcare system out of those choices. And it ended up being an operations issue. They were having some frustrations with just a couple of the way the floors were being managed, and their care was not being managed in the way that they wanted to. So that was definitely a B2B for sure. But I mean, it's B2B. One of those B's is still a customer. The B on the other side of the two.
Right.
Does that help give you some B2B context a little bit? Or it's basically talking to people. I mean, I would avoid surveys in B2B unless you absolutely have to. But I mean, the whole challenge is to really talk to your customer base and those that you're trying to develop relationships with, and get a good understanding of what their perspectives are on your business and how maybe you're not succeeding, or find out ways that you are and capitalize on those.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. The downstream end of a design thinking process, you've got the research and the discovery kind of upstream. In the middle is all the ideation, super fun brainstorming kinds of things. after that, the design thinking process emphasizes prototyping and testing. So kind of like what, because we were just chatting about with your webinar. People that are using design thinking methodology in their businesses don't wait until what they're creating seems to be perfect. They're not going to wait until the webinar is exactly spot on the way that they think it's going to be absolutely perfect. There may be software developers often, I don't know if we have any software developers in the group, will often prototype and roll out their software to test out. Beta testing you hear about all the time, people trying it out to see if it works. A lot of times I've run into people who don't want to take the time to test, or they are in a hurry to rush to market. And I think, in design thinking, I think encourages that testing because it keeps you from going down a rabbit hole. And as small business owners and entrepreneurs, we don't have the time, the patience, or the money to go down a rabbit hole only to find out that we're in the wrong hole. You know what I mean? So by, developing a prototype of your product or service or experience and then testing it out among a small audience just to kind of see how it's going to work and then go back and tweak it and test it again keeps us from, committing a lot of resources, whether it's financial or time or other kinds of resources to a project that, you get so far down the road that you realize, oh shoot, this isn't really solving the problem that I wanted to solve, but I've committed so much to it that I'm going to kind of just have to, might have to keep on that path because there's no way I can go back. Does that make sense? As far as the need for testing, prototyping and testing. Testing can be a little nerve-wracking because you do want to, especially if you're in a really competitive space, kind of limit the audience that you're testing among so that you're not tipping your hand too soon. You know what I mean? I've had a couple of software guys that are like, I don't want anybody to know what I'm working on just yet because they're going to take that idea and just run with it. Well, not if the idea is not refined. You're just testing a new idea out. So
what's the important aspect of testing? Like, when do you realize it's not going to work or that you need to go back to square one, or what's the qualitative part of testing?
Well, before you test, you need to be sure that you articulate what it is, what the results are that you're aiming for, what you want to get out of your product. So if there are a particular level of engagement that you want to get out of the people that are participating in your webinar, or if there is an additional event that you want them to attend, or whatever the goal is for participating in the webinar, if that's not happening, that'll tell you right away, right? Or if you're not meeting your goals. You can't roll out into a test if you don't know what it is that you're going to measure. So you got to make sure that you're really clear before you test what it is that you're trying to accomplish. Does that make some sense? Do any of y'all have specific areas of your business that you were thinking that you might want to try some design thinking activities in, just to experiment with them?
Well, with the next university, we are broadening our products. So we want to introduce a bunch of different products with the next university.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of where the design thinking is going to come into play for us.
So have you identified those products yet, or have you identified, where are you at in the process? Do you know your customer and who you want to reach? Are you at the point now that you need to develop the products that will reach them appropriately?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Quick question: out of everybody participating, just by a show of hands, how many are introducing new products within the next year to year and a half? Everybody.
I'm raising my hand.
Thanks, Rochelle. That's everybody but one person. So.
Wow.
So, Beverly, I feel like you should maybe go down this rabbit hole. So I think we just identified.
Let's go.
Yeah. So.
Just call me Alice. Okay, so who has a good idea, and not just in your mind, but an articulated, documented, written idea and description of your customer base for your new products? Have y'all gotten that far, or is it all upstairs?
We actually this is Rochelle again. we just did our strategic visioning over the holidays and very clearly identified our target audience. I have a marketing firm and an event venue, so I was focusing on the marketing firm in this particular strategy session. And being in marketing and being a graphic designer, I'm very familiar with the design process and how you have to have a balance of collaboration and the scientific method. So we have a process that we follow, but we allow some freedom and flexibility within that process so that we can collaborate with our clients and be good listeners, as well as psychologists sometimes in trying to read their minds and play off of that for really solid ideas. So trying to use those within our own strategy sessions is always challenging. It's always more difficult to do it when you're so close to it, which is why we had a facilitator for our strategy session.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And we actually found it useful that we had been teaching to others and doing workshops on our own about the scientific method. And I happen to be in my past life, a pre-med student. So, a decade or more of science classes at a high level and taking it to the very basics of, coming up with that hypothesis and walking through it really helped us actually identify our target audience, because who is going to allow us to do this with them? And I actually identified to my team, I said, the best client for us are other small giants. I said, because they get it, like they're receptive, and there's just something about, and I know Glenn's trying to put his finger on it too, like, well, what is it about us that makes us special? But it really was truly walking through that scientific method to try to figure out who our target audience was.
That's awesome. No, I love the fact that you went through that. And I think the fact that you documented that process and have simply have it written down and outlined as to who it is that you're going to go after is hugely important. So often we'll go through thinking about who our customer is, our target market, and not write it down, which to me makes it so much more real. You know what I mean? That seems kind of silly, but I've worked with people where a lot of times it's just this spoken sort of general agreement that this is who our target audience is, and it's not ever documented in a way that you can go back and use that as a touchstone to say, well, no, this on paper is who our target audience is. How are we doing? How is the product that we're working on now going to reach that target audience? Do they align with one another? So it kind of keeps you honest in your, to yourself and to your business and to your customer by having that written down.
Definitely. Yeah, I think, having that vision board, it goes beyond the audience. It's also the how and the why and what makes it important. And at the end of the day, it's the big picture of this is why I do what I do as an individual, as a leader of the team, as a client. Whatever end of it you're on, it's important to know where you fit and where you want to go. Right.
Have any of y'all used an empathy map in developing a description of your target audience? Either for current products or the new ones that you're working on?
Nope.
No?
Empathy, like empathizing with someone?
Yes, empathy and as in empathizing. Mm-hmm.
So unpack that for us.
An empathy map truly is one of my favorite exercises to go through. It really helps put the team in the target market's shoes. And I use target market and customer kind of interchangeably in this conversation. It kind of forces you and your team to get outside of yourselves and outside of your business role and thinking more about, Beverly, the customer who's going to, going to be a physician that's referring somebody into a health system or whoever your target audience is. And it's, I wish I had, I don't think I have a JPEG of it to share. I can share an empathy map with you guys afterwards. I can push this out to y'all to take a look. It's a real simple graphic. Usually, I always use the hello, my name is kind of an image in the center. If I'm working on the whiteboard or even just on paper, and name the customer, give the customer name. And then from there, sort of radiating outwards are different triangular sections where you explore what that customer is thinking with regard to the product that you're developing or the business space that you're working in, what they're feeling, what they're hearing, what they're doing, what they're saying. And it's just in the conversation of participating with, like, if you have your senior leadership group together and you're working on this empathy map for the customer named Beverly, it really helps you think like your customer is most likely thinking. There's still a little bit of an assumption because the customer's not in your room. I'm not, sitting in the room with the agency working on the project and saying, well, I think X. You're still making some educated guesses and some assumptions on your customer's part, but the underlying point is you're thinking like the customer would think and not like you as the business leader might think. So in developing that empathy map, you have a much better understanding of the challenges your customer's facing and how you might be able to either better design your product to satisfy what that customer might be experiencing in life. You might be able to develop better messaging to communicate around your product. It's a real nice, easy, simple way to sort of in one frame capture the essence of your typical ideal customer and know where they're coming at so that you can then tailor your communications and your product design to them.
Now, Beverly, can't that be rather assumptive in itself? Because if you're just in your head, even if you're trying to create an empathy map of what you think the customer does, like how do you get outside your head in that process to truly empathize with someone else? I mean, like I'm working on a program right now where I did those steps in my head, went out testing product with actual potential clients and found all kinds of things that I didn't think about.
Yep. Well, therein lies the key. You went out after you did your empathy map and compared it to actual clients. Okay. So you could refine what you found. To just create an empathy map is absolutely assumptive unless you have a way to compare and contrast with a real person.
Right.
What you wouldn't want to do is create an empathy map and just leave it at that. And not make sure that it holds water out in the real world. It gives you a place to start from, for sure. Sometimes you may have done some good secondary research ahead of time and kind of know in advance what people are doing with regard to how they're seeking a particular service that you're also going to develop and be a competitive service. So you may have some secondary data that says, okay, well, I'm trying to think of a good example for you guys. Beverly, the physician, what is she doing if she's not referring patients into the Methodist healthcare system? Well, she's referring them over to where? And you can find that secondary data through other resources. Find out that, that physician's referring more patients over to a competitive healthcare system or not referring them out at all. And maybe they're doing some more services in-house in their own office. But yeah, it definitely needs to go hand in hand with some research to make sure that you're on track. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
You guys? Very cool. What are y'all working on new products, tangible products, or are some of these going to be services too that y'all are working on?
I'm working on a service.
Is it?
I'm also working on a service.
A service also? Okay. Where are you?
A bit of both products that support services.
A hybrid. Awesome. Are you to a point yet that you can test and develop a prototype to test out? Are you still working on features and benefits of the product, or where are y'all at in that process?
I could take a crack at telling you where we're at. We're kind of, I guess, our clients are ones that kind of embrace an innovative edge. So we're able to continually innovate the products, come up with new products that would kind of proactively help our clients. So we're kind of always in that testing phase with our clients, which is and it's partly because we've targeted very specific clients. So we don't have a lot of clients, but we have a lot of big clients, and so that's where it's kind of like, for lack of better terms, it's kind of a boutique kind of arrangement we have, with our clients. We're not out there to serve kind of the masses. We're out there to serve very specific ones that we can build long-term relationships with, and that what we bring to them kind of helps them proactively address their pains, and then in building that relationship and trust, it helps us continually bring new things to them, and so there's a good kind of symbiotic relationship there.
Do they collaborate with you on developing the products and the features?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
absolutely.
awesome.
Yeah, we've gone through like one of the exercises we've gone through in the summer was testing design sprints, and you're probably familiar with those. It's kind of from the technology sector, but it was kind of a very interesting process in that it really got you on the fast track of coming up with these with the design ideas, kind of going through similar types of principles that you're talking about here. I guess it's always neat to try different things, because you pull different pieces which you find are valuable and which you find might not fit exactly. So I think that was a really interesting exercise. But I think it's helped us improve kind of our what I'd call our core approach. By kind of informing us of those of other things. So it's I think that's what I always look for is the pieces that kind of fit and make sense, and of course, just like everything, it's hard to kind of plunk one system in and put it right in, but I think the real value is being able to take the pieces that make sense and incorporate it into your process and procedures.
Absolutely. There's a lot of value in exploring all different ways of doing things, for sure, and mixing them up for your own greatest benefit. There's I would encourage you guys, if you're curious about design thinking activities and exercises, there is a great website called GoGamestorm.com that's based on the book called Game Storming, which is Josh, you familiar with that one?
Yeah, I got a copy. Great.
Yeah, they've got a wonderful online component too, and they've actually turned some of those activities into an interactive opportunity online, so you're not doing them yourself on the whiteboard, you're actually doing them in an online space, which is kind of interesting. Cool. It's the database is sometimes a little bit difficult to navigate, but it does have a search feature, so if you're working on a particular type of product, or you're challenged with you're working on something that's operational versus something that's product specific, you can use those different parameters to search for design thinking activities. They call them games, that have come from all over the place. All different kinds of consultancies and agencies and individuals and experts have contributed their activities and instructions on how to do those to that online website, which I have found really valuable. In the past, there's a couple of them that I reference in my book. There are a couple others that I don't think have made it onto that encyclopedic website just yet, but it's a fabulous resource to play with. Even just kind of on your own, if you want to explore a specific type of design thinking exercise before introducing it to a larger team at your business, or with people that you collaborate with, or mentors and that type of thing. I meant to tell Eric, bless you, earlier when he sneezed. Peter fever, probably. Any questions that is there anything in particular about design thinking that maybe you're just curious about?
Yeah, Beverly, I have a question.
Yeah.
So describe for me like if you're working with a client who is a perfect fit for using design thinking, and somebody that you meet and it would be a really bad idea.
Which? Yeah.
Everybody should use it and everybody benefits from it.
Everybody should use it, and not everybody will. And not everybody will have the capacity for appreciating its value. I have definitely come across quite a few people. I think the bigger the corporation and the more traditional the industry, the harder it has been to introduce design thinking. Healthcare in particular has been a real challenge. Traditional healthcare delivery services. I have worked with some healthcare startups that are very much disruptive in nature and want to create something new and shake up the industry. So they're all for whatever might be, a new way of thinking and approaching healthcare. That industry in particular has been a real challenge for me personally. I think if you have a client who is really afraid of change, that can be a real challenge. Just the design thinking methodology in and of itself is quite a bit different than the majority of people are used to working with in business. It also challenges people to think differently and during the activity itself and just the entire process. So if you have, it doesn't matter demographically who that client might be, but if they're just in general afraid of change, I think they're gonna have a harder time embracing it. As far as people that are, perfect for introducing design thinking methodology, anybody who I would consider themselves a disruptor, anybody who wants to do something completely different in a particular space or has identified a problem and they're passionate about solving it, I think they're great candidates for a design thinking approach because they're looking for that edge, that little something different that's going to really be distinctive for them and make them more successful than, all the other Joes that are out there working in their same space. Have you used it much? It's probably really intuitive for you, Josh, I would think, looking at the whiteboard behind you.
Yeah.
I can't make out what's on the board, but just the fact that you have a big whiteboard with a bunch of ink on it makes me think that you're probably doing a lot of visual thinking.
Yeah, we're disruptive at times. We've seen similar roadblocks. The difficulty is to try to discern, up front, what are they trying to achieve? Really, what's somebody trying to achieve? And then what are the processes that we bring to try to help them reach those desired outcomes?
Right.
And then, trying to navigate. That's why I asked the question, because I'm just curious how you discern, hey, this is going to be a great person. This person wants to be disruptive. They want to do this. Or they're just talking about it. They like the concept of being disruptive, but when push comes to shove, they don't really want to do it. Or they'd like to do something different, but because of constraints like, in healthcare where there's all these regulations and things around them that make it difficult, they can't do it. Mm-hmm. But with the end in mind, what are we trying to do? And then bringing the process to it.
I would think it's...
How do you discern between those? How do you decide, okay, this person, because we've been real fortunate recently that, most of the people that we work with, they come to us already wanting to progress and be a little disruptive. Mm-hmm. But how do you say, you know what, we're probably not the best people to work together?
Kevin, you were going to jump in and say something.
Yeah, I guess when you're describing that, my kind of inclination would be that, and I'm going to give a plug to Bo's book, is there's a chapter in there that talks about the art of business, and certain people, and I kind of, I guess, feel myself in this camp is see entrepreneurship and business as a very creative process, and it's about. I can't remember exactly how it's described in the book, but it's about, taking like I was talking about before, about taking the bits and pieces, taking the different colors of paints and kind of putting them into your business to create a masterpiece. It's not a paint by numbers, or some people look at it as a paint by numbers, and I think that probably wouldn't be the type of people that would be inspired by design thinking. But there's those that want to kind of create those textures, those different colors, those mixtures, that everything that kind of that the pieces are all there for everybody, but it's about how you assemble them that makes a difference. And I think that it's those that really see business as a creative process, or entrepreneurship as a very creative process, and uses that creative passion to drive them forward, in always looking for those different things that it would be very kind of appealing to. There's going to be those that see business as a recipe book approach, or those that see it as a paint by numbers, that is probably just not going to jive, and it's just kind of what inspires them. Like a very traditional kind of business approach would be more like the cookbook type of thing, whereas a more free form type of business person or entrepreneurial type of person would probably really embrace this.
I love the cookbook analogy, and just a cooking analogy in general. There's our personal friends of mine that love to cook, and they will follow a recipe to a T and not deviate from it at all. And then there's other friends of mine, and myself included, that really love to cook, and a recipe is just a suggestion for how that dish might want to be, how you might want to cook it and have it turn out a certain way. Or, I think they're open to interpretation. So just take those bits and pieces and, switch out an herb and make something new. Josh, to answer your question, I don't know if there's a hard and fast way to discern early on in the process if somebody's good for design thinking.
Right.
For me personally, it's very much a gut reaction.
Yeah.
Just like vetting whether or not somebody's going to be a new client in general. You either click or you don't. And if you're speaking a design-based language in that first meeting with the client, and they seem to get it and respond to it, it's sort of an instinctive level, then they're probably going to be a really good fit to work with, especially for, a design thinking approach. But, sometimes you can just see that there's the language is just kind of floating around them, and it's not resonating at all. And then I think, okay, well, maybe not. Maybe that's much more of a recipe, paint by numbers kind of client,
Right.
Beverly, you've talked quite a bit about how design thinking goes for developing a product or being client-facing. How did design thinking apply to how your team works, or to even the physical office space?
A team and physical office space are really I would apply them in two very separate ways. From a team perspective, design thinking, as it comes to managing people, to me, it's just all about meaning and purpose. And, back to our collective values conversation, you have to be very purposeful in how you design your team, whether it's senior leadership or frontline staff or anybody within the organization. I think you have to be, you have to know your end goal, which is what is the experience you want your customer to have when dealing with your team, whether it's a subset like the frontline folks. Maybe you operate a call center and you want the callers to have a very specific type of experience with that staff. Then you're going to design not only how you want the experience to flow and what the tone of it needs to be and all of that, but you're also going to be very purposeful in designing the team that backs it up, meaning you're going to look at their strengths and skill sets and that type of thing.
So you genuinely
might at center.
Sorry. You genuinely might apply the 5 whys questioning to how you're developing your hiring process, or how you're actually implementing your training process.
Oh, absolutely. The 5 whys are great for really getting down to the nut of any challenge. I think it'd be much harder to prototype your team and test them out, but you could certainly, kind of prototype a particular type of employee and test them in a small little universe, sort of a probationary period. But the 5 whys would be a great approach to that. You could also do an empathy map for team members as well. What does your ideal employee's empathy map look like? What are they hearing, seeing, doing, thinking with regard to the position that you want them to be in? So, somebody on a front line in a call center may have a very, very distinct personality and backed up by an empathy map that would look completely different than, one of your VPs.
Well, Kelsey, I think that's something that probably you guys really understand at Nick's Pizza already. Do you have something like that that's genuinely outlined, maybe not as a map, but as a guide or a form for what you're looking for how that frontline employee, how that server or bartender interacts with customers and what they deliver about Nix?
Yeah, it's alignment with our purpose and values. That's really where it starts, and then it's using that C-score. So when they come in to apply, just making sure that they're doing what we want them to do with guests to that person that they're talking to. So that's the two things that we really look for when we're hiring.
And do you have a probationary period for new hires?
They usually weed themselves out through the training process. If they're not a fit, they're not going to get certified. It's just not going to happen. So that kind of is the probationary period, is that training period.
Gotcha.
How long is your training period?
Well, it depends per position.
Mm-hmm.
Like a pizza maker, they'll go to orientation, they'll go to their 201 class, and then they'll have about anywhere from 6 to 9 shifts. So it really depends on their availability.
Gotcha.
And then, a server is a little bit longer. So it just depends on the work group. But I'd say like 3 to 4 weeks, like a month.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, everyone, we have about 10 minutes left, so about 5 more minutes for discussion, and then we'll go ahead and wrap things up. So if you have your tough questions for Beverly, feel free to shoot them out now.
I've got one question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just wondering, with regards to doing design thinking in person versus kind of like we are here virtually, is there a lot is there a lot of benefit towards the in person versus kind of distributed around the world?
There can be, just for me personally, I enjoy in person because I'm a visual thinker, and so we'll usually be writing stuff down on a board as we're talking, that type of thing. I'm deliberately not writing during this conversation so I can stay focused on you guys and not go off on a tangent. But I think with a technology setup like we have right now, where you can see people, you can certainly go through the design thinking activities virtually. I think what's more critical is being able to interpret body language and see one another and still build some kind of a connection, even though I can't physically reach out and smack you on the arm when I have an idea that I want to share. I can go, hey, and there's still that little bit of an energy flow. But there's no reason that you would have to do any kind of design thinking process in person.
Great, thanks.
Josh?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, how would you describe design thinking compared to like Lean or Six Sigma kind of approaches?
That's a really good question. And I will be honest with you, I am not overly versed in Lean or Six Sigma.
Okay.
I've just never deliberately exposed myself to that. Glenn, you probably have a bit more perspective.
Yeah, there's a little bit of heart and soul in design thinking that I don't feel really comes across in Six Sigma or Lean.
Okay.
To be brutally honest about it, I feel like Six Sigma and Lean, I think, really apply more strictly to process-driven environments, where it's looking for an exact item that needs to be pulled out of the process that will improve efficiency, versus my interaction with design thinking and through my talk with Beverly is that there's that gut portion that goes along with design and art, and I really feel like that applies more. The little bit of design thinking that I've done, it's not a cold process. There's no ruthlessness in it, and to me,
that's a great way to say it.
My experience with Lean and Six Sigma is that there is a little bit of ruthlessness to it, and it's solely about the process, not necessarily about the color of the process at all.
I guess my thought on that too is that I would categorize Lean and Six Sigma as almost diminishing returns. The more and more you get, the less and less there is to get. And whereas I think if I were to understand it correctly, design thinking is probably more discovery of opportunities that are kind of, I guess, so to speak, unlimited.
Sure.
So it kind of takes you in a little bit different direction. That's in a big picture sense. That's kind of how I see the difference between those.
I think that's a great descriptor. And one of the things that I would say, about design thinking too, just anecdotally, is that I think it allows and is a lot more forgiving of the statement of, well, it's just the right thing to do, period. You might go through the design thinking process and find out that, your customer needs something in particular that you can deliver that's not necessarily going to have the best ROI, but, in the long run, it's the right thing to do for that customer. And, you'll have a different kind of return at the end of the day, return on loyalty, or, just a greater, deeper relationship with that customer than, it would look like on a balance sheet.
Okay, that's fair. Thanks.
Sure.
Anybody else? Rochelle or Dave or folks we can't see?
Eric, you can wave since we still have you on mute.
I feel good. I wrote down some notes of some other things I want to research, like the empathy map. I hadn't heard of that. And Game Stormy I had heard of, so it was a nice reminder to go back and research that some more too. So I appreciate your time, and it was really enlightening to hear from everybody.
Good, excellent. I'm glad you were able to call in.
We actually have some PDF downloads that Beverly's putting together specifically for our group that you'll be able to get from her if you shoot her an email at Beverly Ingle, and there's no period in that. It's all one word, BEVERLYINGLE @gmail.com.
In fact, Rochelle, there'll be an empathy map in one of those PDFs as well, so you can.
Oh, good. Thanks. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Beverly, was there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I think this was a great conversation. If there's any questions that come up later, don't hesitate to, reach out and shoot them over to me. I'd be happy to answer. Or, if there's a resource that you're looking for, I'd help you try and find it with regard to design thinking. Just, give it a try, give it an opportunity to work into your processes. It's a lot of fun. It's been really valuable in my work with my clients too. So hopefully you'll find some value in it also.
Okay, well that's it for this one. Check out more Fishbowls exclusively for the Small Giants community at smallgiants.org.